Welcome to Failed Forward, a podcast for professionals who are wondering, how the hell did I get here?
Join your host, Rachel Durkan, and me, Donna Miller, as we discuss the messy, bumpy, and often unattractive journey to success.
After all, if it isn't hard to do, is it really worth doing? Hello, everyone, and welcome to Failed Forward, the podcast for those of us wondering, how the hell did I get here? My name is Rachel Durkan. I'm with Paradigm Marketing and Design. We are a web marketing, branding, and sales enablement agency that that specializes in working with clients with a complex sale. So if you have a sales team and you require a human interaction to close a deal, we can shorten the number of meetings that they're having and improve their closing rate. And I sure hope today goes well, because I have had all sorts of problems even getting the recording to start today. But I am joined, and my poor co-host Donna is sick today. So we have just me trying to hold this hot mess together. So dear and I am joined by an amazing guest who I love talking to, Christy Hamilton. Christy, tell us about yourself.
Hey, thanks, Rachel. So I am Christy Hamilton, like Rachel has just said. I am currently the COO and now soon to be partner at Carey and Co, which is very exciting.
I did not know that.
I know. We're rolling it out here too. Thank you. It's been a long time coming in some ways, and so I'm excited about it. But I think, and Carey and Co is a nonprofit consulting firm, so we help a lot of different organizations figure out their back office, and that's really good work if you can get it. So I'm very lucky to be there. But I think honestly, like, the work that I really do is just the business of people, right? How people interact, how they make their decisions, what it is day to day to like be in this world and trying to affect some change. And I think for me right now, I'm just doing the business of people as a COO, and a long chapter of doing a whole lot of other things.
But it's so funny because you mentioned before this we started recording that I didn't realize you were in theater and that you were in art. And in my work with you, you're so pragmatic and on point. I mean, you're fun to work with, but you get it, you get people, you get what has to happen. You're like boom, boom, boom. And that seems like a different side of the brain than art.
I know, right?
So tell us about your journey and how you ended up here.
Yeah, of course. So I think, I think probably one of the biggest obstacles that it is about being in this life is like figuring out, okay, what chapter am I really going to live in? And I think so far I've done a whole lot of different ones. And I started out as a theater artist, moving to New York, living on both coasts, doing all of these like very creative things, anything away from the straight and narrow, anything away from like a corporate structure. And I think it's an interesting turn then later on in life to realize like, oh, some of these skills that I have, some of these strengths that I have are actually better utilized in more structure. So naturally I end up as a COO implementing structure, I guess.
In an accounting firm. I mean, you're not accounting, but you guys do a lot of back office.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think even when I joined Carey and Co, I was coming straight out of a theater nonprofit where my personality is probably one of the smaller ones in the room, to an accounting firm where I am definitely one of the bigger ones.
Yeah.
And it taught me a whole lot about, as an artist, I think when you're looking at corporate structure, when you're looking at these jobs that are more traditional, you go, oh man, those people really haven't figured out. Like, I'm just out here just trying to emote, trying to create whatever the verb is. And what I've realized in joining this kind of, this side of the coin, is figuring out that all those skills that I had as a theater person or as a creative person are actually so applicable. And I think when I first started, I went to a webinar and it was all about sales, and the whole thing was about active listening. And I thought to myself, that is so basic. Like, how is this?
So many people are not good at it. Yeah.
No. And it was like, this was her revelation, right? And I understand that she wanted to explain it. She wanted to tell people like, this is the thing that you've been missing. And I thought I was learning about this as a 12-year-old, right? Because that's what you need to be as an actress. So I think for me, that was like one of the bigger parts. And now I think, especially coming out of like a nonprofit theater background, you really do learn how to get things done, like very pragmatically. It might be counterintuitive, but you don't have a lot of money. So you got to get things.
Yeah. So you went from theater, finding yourself, to soon to be partner of a major firm.
Yeah.
was that the plan all like I'm gonna guess that wasn't the plan all along. What was the journey? Was it always rainbows and butterflies? Like tell me a little bit about, how you
I couldn't tell you how little I planned this out. I think that's some of the beauty of my life so far is that it really has been failed forward. And I think that's what I like about the title of the podcast, because I think it is all about energy and taking risks and saying like, well, I don't actually know what the next step is, but I have to take it. And I think throughout life, I've figured out there's a lot of these different adages that I use now that remind me when I'm in all of these different sections, dealing with all of these different people, like who I am. And I think one of those is like, keep your side of the street clean. I think that's a really good one. And I think the other one is like, play the player, not the game, right? Remember what your intentions are. Remember who the person is on the other side of you, not some other like, I don't know, nebulous game that's being played. And I think those two, plus a whole lot of others, remind me that no matter what chapter I am in, that like it's still the strengths in my kind of internal voice is what leads me to the next step. But it was definitely not all rainbows and butterflies. And I think this is a fun story. But when I was in nonprofit theater, it was, you're making barely anything. My first job was like $36,000 and I was so happy to have it. And now that I'm in this like more traditional big corporate structure, when I'm talking to some folks and their first job is 120 grand or 130 grand, I'm like, holy cow.
Yeah.
Like very different 20s, very different 20s experience. So I think, and that has just a lot of self-reliance that you're taught throughout that of like, what does it actually mean to be me? And to be me in this world and in all of these different facets, because I think I'm a junkie for variety. Like I want change. I want to see something. I think I love talking to other people because I have a long memory for people's stories and a high degree of curiosity for why we do what we do. How did you make that decision? And I think a lot of that is based in theater, which teaches you that, we're all trying to get a need, a desire. And then we use motivations and we use tactics to get to those things. And that is so applicable across any kind of chapter I've ever been in that I feel like people would really benefit from thinking about it that way.
So it sounds like what I'm hearing, you said, keeping your side of the street clean. And I want to talk more about that and what that means in a second. But it sounds like you've always been rooted in your values and your strengths, and you've always understood yourself. And you just applied that to whatever situation you were in. It sounds like, and that's amazing because a lot of people don't have that. A lot of people are so insecure or unsure of what they're good at. And it sounds like just no matter what environment you're put in, you're like, this is me. I know what I'm good at. I can leverage these strengths to enhance that. Is that like,
I love that. I have a therapist that would have been so happy to have heard that. I think that is great.
I will bill you my $20.
Thank you.
But like, do you have any advice for people on like how to like live true to that? Like know what you're good at and lean into it. Like, because I don't think that a lot of people do that.
No, I don't think so either. And I think life is definitely not all, I have not always known how to root and ground myself, right? And I think there have been some very terrible experiences in my life that have taught me the consequences for not being rooted and grounded in like who I am. And I think that there is a song too of like, something that has been popping in my mind, like I've suffered for the peace that I have in my mind is like such a beautiful kind of statement. But I also think intuition needs to be developed, right? And I think we all take different times, incubation periods of like how it takes to get from, I don't know, a child in your parents' house to a full-blown adult being like able to make any kind of decisions that you need in whatever moment. And I think allowing yourself to develop that intuition and asking the questions, right? And I think that's part of, tell me who you are, tell me how you got here. When this situation happened in your life, what did you do? What were the influences that were around you? And I think those questions help me then figure out, okay, well, if I was in that situation, what would I have done? Or how could I use that experience to better understand how other people would be acting in this, in a situation, I think is the best part that you can do, because I don't think it's a magic piece that you're like, okay, now I'm going to get rooted and grounded. I'm going to go do the work, because I think the world is full of people. And so if you need to be rooted and grounded in yourself, I think, or my best way of done that is just to look outside and go, okay, who are the other people on the side of the table? Who are these people that I have to talk to or interact with? And I think that has taught me a whole lot about there's not a right way to go through this world. So just figure out what works best for you.
And how to lean in and leverage
Yeah.
their strengths. So you mentioned earlier that those two things that you focus on, and one of them was keep your side of the street clean. Tell me more about that. What does that mean?
I love this one. My sister and I use this one like all of the time, because I think keeping your side of the street clean is a adaptable, complex adage that doesn't seem that way. But if in the situation you're going, I have to make these hard decisions, but how do I make sure that I remain myself and then be able to take in information? Because I think that's a part where people shut off. They go, oh, no, I made up my mind. I don't actually need any more input. I'm just going to make this decision and stick with it because that's how I'm rooted and grounded, is like to stick with what I know. And I think for me, in my job and in just what I'm passionate about, I always have to be in taking input, right? Because I think people are emotional and complex, and I think they go through different chapters. So if you know that you have to make this hard decision, you have to remember the person on the other side of you has to win. You have to win. Whatever the overarching goal is also has to come out clean and win. And so how do you make that decision when the pieces are constantly moving? And I think keeping your side of the street clean is reminding yourself it's not always going to come out like perfect and clean or clear. But if I remind myself to keep my side of the street clean, it reminds me to ask and remember what that person's goal is, what my goal is, what the overarching goal is that I'm trying to attain, because that helps me root in like the present. What can I do right now to affect the situation?
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So it sounds like, I mean, you sound like a very empathetic person, and in your job, you have to talk to a lot of people all day and deal with a lot of personalities and a lot of emotion and and 1 + 1 = 3. How do you protect yourself? Like, does that drag you down? I mean, it would drag me down. I guess how do you protect yourself from getting too empathetic? Because you can swing that pendulum too far and take it home.
Oh God, what a good question. I wasn't ready for that one. How do I protect myself now? I think there's a few things that I do. And I think it requires you being able to check in. It requires you being able to be present, because I am more empathetic than not. And I think my baby sister, who is quick to anger and who is quick to say, no, that's not the right way, is like kind of my soldier behind me in some ways. And so I think it's a personal thing, and then having a group, right? I think especially when you're really empathetic, you do have to remind yourself of boundaries, and you have to remind yourself that and I think it drills down to this: if I am not feeling good in a situation, I have done too much. There is something about it that, because I can remain fairly even keeled and fairly neutral, because I don't actually care what your answer is. I just care more that there is an answer, or we can get to like what has influenced us to be in this situation. Yeah. But I think if in that moment I start to feel like I'm putting in more of the work. And I think we all know what that feeling is intrinsically, because you do feel dragged down and you feel weighted. That is the first part that I go, oh, I think I have to call my baby sis. I think I have to take a step back and remind myself that I might be doing too much of the work.
Because that when you're dealing with people and essentially in your role as a partner, you have a huge influence over people's lives, whether you want to or not. And so that can be really weighing. And so your ability to do that is what advice would you give to somebody else? Like, when you have to run a business, but you have to deal with people, where's that line between running the business and doing what's best for the business? I know you guys have a PE firm, and there's bottom lines, and there's goals, and then there's people and feelings. And I always find that blending those two things is very exhausting, at least for me.
Sure. I think, I don't know if I find it is exhausting. I think I find it a little bit, it's almost like a puzzle, to me, right? Of like, there's curiosity to it. There's some kind of interest to like, how do I thread this needle? Because the needle is kind of moving. And I think because I love people as much as I do, the variety, it gives me that junky feeling of like, oh, good, there's yet another moving target to figure out how to blend people and their needs and wants into what the organization is trying to do is a personal. But I think the way that my tactic to using that is communication, right? Like we're going to talk about it, and I will talk about it both sides. If you're not going to say anything in the meeting, I will do all of the talking.
Yeah,
but
I'll be both. I'll play devil's advocate all day. Yeah.
Don't worry. But I think over communicating and then allowing like honesty, right?
Yeah.
I don't know all of the answers. I'm trying to figure this out just as much as you are, but I also know that I'm going to communicate that to you. I'm going to try and make sure that your needs are also involved in this, because without people, there is no business in any business.
So especially service, but any business, the people are everything.
Right.
And
so
how
getting
they
good
show
at
up.
people is actually, I think, the strength that we all need to practice a whole lot more.
And so that's kind of the it ties all together. Your background in arts and entertainment and understanding people runs right into it. How many people do you think miss that? Like, how many business owners do you think just like over their head?
I couldn't even begin to count. I would think it'd be easier to count the ones that do get it, right?
Yeah.
I think it's it's a soft skill for sure, but I think it's a rare skill to be able to put yourself outside yourself and be able to look at what the other person may need without judgment, like as neutral as possible. And I'm not saying that we don't all have biases or you have your own baggage, but being aware of that and being able to be the bigger person sounds a little cliche in this situation, but to be that person that can go, it doesn't matter. Like, I still know that this needs to be handled, and I need to figure out how to handle it.
And is it the right thing to do? It comes down to integrity too, right?
Yeah.
And aligned values. I've worked with people where they're good people. And I've even had, it's funny, one of my good friends asked me a question because one of our other friends and I grew apart. And they're like, why don't you like each other anymore? And I'm like, it's not that I don't like them. It's just that their values have become different than my values. And they're not a bad person.
No.
They just don't align. And
Right.
so I think that's why everyone talks about values in business and like, oh, it's like some people say it's like a bullshit HR thing, but I don't think it is. I think it's, if your company lives your values, then, and other people don't align with them, then they need to leave the company. And if they're in the company, then, and I've had that multiple times where we've had to let people go or they've left because they were great workers, but their values just didn't align. And that's probably why it's so important. At least that's why I feel it's so important to have like aligned values with aligned people in an organization.
I agree with you, because I think without the values, and I think values are like adages is what like, do you understand this adage? Is this something that you would look at, right? Is like how I do it or how I do a sort, because it's a sorting of.
It is. And some values are more important than others. And, like 100 values out there. And just because someone's values were mine is number 20 and theirs is number 1, that's okay. But we just don't align.
No judgment. Yeah. But also learning when you are aligned and when you're not, I think is also like the brave step, the courageous step.
So important.
Oh, I'm in the wrong place. And I think that's what happened to me in theater, right? I like working at the theater nonprofits. I always felt like a fish out of water, because I was like, why aren't we thinking about some of these more like broadly, whatever the examples are. But I think had I figured that out earlier, I probably would have ended up somewhere else before this. Who knows?
Yeah.
Right? But the point is it's Einstein's quote of like, if, make a fish feel like it can fly and it'll think it's stupid forever.
Yeah.
And I think is a really important thing to instill in the people that you have working there, but also as an employee being like, does this actually align with me? Do I feel like I'm a fish, or do I feel like I'm trying to fly? And making your choices based on that.
That's so good. All right. Well, unfortunately, we're up on time. This went so fast. Right. I love talking to you. So tell our audience where they can learn more about you.
Sure. So I think right now I'm actually redoing my LinkedIn page, and I'm going to have a lot. Exactly. I have a lot more of these articles that I've actually written and am working on about these adages and how they've helped me, because honestly, I I don't know how I've gotten here, but I know these things have helped me. And I think they could be at least a good guiding star to some other people. So I'm writing some things about what it is to keep your side of the street clean, what it is to like play the player and not the game, or to make sure that a whole lot of other ones really kind of resonate, right? Or what resonates with you. So look out for that. I guess that's what I'm going to do this year.
Amazing. All right. So for all of those of you watching, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Failed Forward, and we will see you in the next 2 weeks. And in the meantime, make sure you mess up and get up again.